The Old Testament contains over 600 laws, many of which we would like to obey. But before we do, let's ask ourselves, what was their purpose? Were they meant more for justice or for mercy? It may seem like a strange question, but it touches on one of the deepest tensions in the Old Testament. Are God's people a nation of Pharisees, legalistic and judgmental? Or are they a nation of bleeding hearts, overly focused on forgiveness and second chances? Let's look at it from both sides and then bring them together. First, we have justice. We think of this as fair consequences. You break my window, you pay for it. You steal my phone. You go to jail. This is called retributive justice, and it's not as cruel as it sounds. In fact, Exodus 21:23-25 says that if someone injures another person, the punishment must match the injury. This was to prevent a cruel form of revenge. An eye for an eye means that you can't get more than what you gave. You don't get to chop off his hand because you lost your finger. The law prevents the rich from taking advantage of the poor by giving them disproportionate punishment. It also ensures that the powerful cannot oppress the weak, because in the end, they will reap what they have sown. That's justice. But Israel's laws also reveal a deep concern for social justice, protecting those who could not protect themselves. Widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor are mentioned specifically because they were especially vulnerable to exploitation. Deuteronomy 24:17-22 says, "Do not pervert justice or show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the rich, but judge your neighbor as impartially as you would judge yourself. I am the Lord your God." Leaders were not allowed to accept bribes or pervert justice in favor of the rich. Everyone had to be treated fairly. That's social justice. Now, let's turn to mercy. First, there's the Sabbath. The Sabbath was not just a day of rest for the Israelites, but also for everyone around them. Servants, foreigners, and even animals were to be given a break. Everyone needed a day to rest, including the oppressors and the oppressed. It was a powerful symbol of God's rule over all, and it showed that even the powerful were not allowed to exploit the weak. That's mercy. Then there's the Jubilee. Every 50 years, all debts were cancelled, all slaves were set free, and all land was returned to its original owners. The Jubilee was a time of mercy. It showed God's heart for the poor and the oppressed. It was a day of liberation for those who had been taken advantage of, a fresh start for those who had fallen behind. That's mercy. Next, we have judicial mercy. If someone killed another person accidentally, they were allowed to flee to one of 6 cities of refuge until they could prove in court that it was an accident. They could not be put to death until they had their day in court. This allowed for the possibility of mercy. The person who committed murder could escape revenge while still allowing for justice to be done. Not everyone who committed a crime had to die. There was a chance to tell their side of the story. That's mercy. Finally, most of Israel's laws required multiple witnesses for the death penalty, which made capital punishment almost unheard of. It was very difficult to get an accurate verdict, so most people who were accused of crimes were not executed. That's mercy. In summary, Israel's laws were not purely legal codes. They were a reflection of God's character. He is just, but he is also merciful. The laws show that God's heart is for the oppressed, the poor, and the powerless. They were made to be treated fairly, to be protected, and to be set free. At the same time, the laws also show that God desires order and peace. He wants people to be held accountable for their actions. He wants justice to be done. The best way to understand the balance between these two is found in Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Justice gives structure. To our lives, it gives us boundaries and consequences. But mercy gives our lives heart. It reminds us to forgive, to be compassionate, and to help those in need. If we emphasize justice only, we will become harsh and unforgiving. If we emphasize mercy only, we will ignore accountability. But God's law shows us that true righteousness is a balance between these two.